Hi, welcome to the Movilith, the show that knows what's on the dark side of the moon. I'm Stephen Kelvin.
And I'm Mark Acosta, and today we're talking about space movies. Now, what are space movies exactly? You might think we're talking about sci-fi movies, but we're actually talking about plausible or historic space movies. But for today, we're talking about historic NASA movies. And then in the second part, when we go into the next episode, we'll be talking about plausible space movies. And we can start with our first slide here, which kind of breaks everything down. So we'll start with The Right Stuff, which was made in 1983, and that's a movie about the early days of NASA. And we'll go into Hidden Figures, which takes place around the same time period. Then we'll talk about First Man, which is a movie which is about Neil Armstrong. And then we'll finish it up with Apollo 13, which is one of the greatest NASA movies ever made. So yeah, let's start with The Right Stuff. Great movie. Really sets the standard for where we go with the rest of these movies because it starts off, it's about the Mercury 7 astronauts and the Mercury program, which was like the early days of NASA when we were sending pilots into orbit and a lot of things that basically led into the first landing on the moon. The earliest astronauts were all test pilots. They were men in the Air Force, Navy, and Marines that were pilots for different planes. They were pilots for experimental aircrafts and things like that, so they were sort of, it was natural for them to be the first ones to become NASA astronauts.
Oh yeah, and then you have the greatest one that kind of starts it all off, Chuck Yeager. The movie kind of begins off with his breaking the Mach 1 barrier.
Yeah, the sound barrier.
Yeah.
Half these engineers never been off the ground, you know. I mean, they're liable to tell you that the sound barrier is a brick wall in the sky. It'll rip your ears off if you try to go through it. If you ask me, I don't believe the damn thing even exists.
I think, to me, the Chuck Yeager sequences really they put this movie on another level. And like one interesting thing about this movie was written and directed by a guy named Philip Kaufman. But originally he was co-writing it with a guy named William Goldman, who I believe is famous for writing The Princess Bride and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. But essentially there was a disagreement between the two of them about whether to include the Chuck Yeager sequences from the novel, the original novel by Tom Wolfe. And William Goldman didn't think they should include the Chuck Yeager stuff. He thought they should focus purely on the Mercury 7 astronauts. But Philip Kaufman was adamant about including the Chuck Yeager sequences. And I think he was 100% right, because to me, they really make the movie. It gives it this like added layer of this like mythic quality. Like it roots the movie in how our NASA program came from the aerospace industry and things like that. And Chuck Yeager was sort of one of those pilots that was sort of the godfather of that next level of aviation. And even though he didn't become one of the astronauts, a lot of people looked up to him.
You know, it's interesting when you say that, because like when I think about the mythic quality of how you just described that, in that first kind of beginning sequence, when you see Chuck Yeager, he comes in on a horse, and it has that kind of very Western feel.
Yeah, he's very much like a cowboy.
Oh yeah, and he's like blazing his own way, and he does good. Like what he does is being the test pilot.
Yeah.
And then you have the others that, you know, as you said, they look up to him as this mythic figure, and then they want to blaze their own trail. And what's new? What's the new horizon? It's the space program.
Yeah.
And then that's when we go jumping into the Mercury program.
And a lot of the Chuck Yeager sequences take place on Edwards Air Force Base, right, in Northern California? Okay, so that's where like they have like that bar that's near the Air Force Base that everybody hangs out at, and it's like this desert bar. But yeah, the Chuck Yeager sequences are really great. One of the opening Chuck Yeager sequences, as you mentioned, the scene where Chuck Yeager breaks the sound barrier, it sort of sets up the entirety of this movie. So yeah, in that scene, you'll see he uses a little wooden stick to close that hatch, and that's because in the scene before, him and his wife were riding horses out in the desert, and he ended up falling, like hurting his arm pretty bad. But he didn't want to tell like the higher ups there, otherwise they wouldn't have let him fly. So he gets his friend to like just get a stick real quick to help him close that hatch and stuff.
Yeah, Chuck Yeager, the real like cowboy test pilot.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely embodied that like cowboy spirit.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. Now that we mentioned Chuck Yeager, we could probably like move on into the next phase of the movie. Really goes into really the Mercury 7 astronauts, and so we have test pilots. Some of them are from the Air Force, some from the Navy, and some from the Marines. And so it's these 7 different men that all get tested. They have a lot of different men that they're testing from different parts of the military to see who's the best. And these 7 men end up being the ones that pass the test and become the Mercury 7 astronauts.
I love the friendly competition between the astronauts.
Yeah.
And how it's also kind of juxtaposed with the the competition that the United States is having with Soviet Russia at the time too.
Yeah.
That one's more darker with
Yeah.
the Cold War going on.
You see throughout the movie, they really formed a group, being the Mercury 7
Strong
astronauts.
bond, a fellowship.
Yeah, the Fellowship of the Mercury 7. And I guess there are 7 of them, but I guess we kind of focus on maybe 3 or 4 of them. We focus a lot on John Glenn, Gus Grissom,
Alan Shepard.
and then Cooper. I can't remember what his first name is. But those are sort of the 4 that we kind of follow throughout the movie. And yeah, they became pretty famous astronauts. And then Alan Shepard was one of the men that walked on the moon later in the Apollo missions and things like that. Gus Grissom, unfortunately, died in the Apollo disaster, I believe. And that's one interesting thing I guess we could mention here is like doing research for this episode was kind of terrifying at certain points when you read the stories about the things that went wrong and certain astronauts that died and things like that. These guys were really brave, especially the first astronauts to go in when it was still such an experimental thing to be thrown into orbit like that. So yeah, I mean, it really took nerves of steel to be one of these guys.
Oh yeah.
Of the movies we're talking about today, this one comes the closest to like talking about how our space program was built by the Nazis, and like Werner von Braun's kind of an important character in this movie. And then there's that funny scene where they stand up to the German scientists or whatever about how they want to have a little more control and things like that.
There's a quote that just cracks me up about this, that's within this movie, and it's just that our Germans are better than their Germans.
Was it them? Was it their German scientists that got them up there first?
No. No, it was not, Senator. Our Germans are better than their Germans.
Because they're talking about how the Russians are, they're in the space race,
Yeah.
like the Russians launched Sputnik, and that's what launched the whole space race. Interesting thing that this movie mentions.
Yeah.
One other thing I'd like to mention about this movie is this movie actually is very hilarious. There's some comedy gold in this movie. Like the 2 recruiters played by Jeff Goldblum and Harry Shearer from The Simpsons. Like this movie is hilarious, like at certain points.
And that's Titov on the right, and on the left, that's Gagarin.
Oh, no, I think that's Titov on the left, Gagarin's on the right.
No.
Yeah.
Well, they bear great resemblance to each other.
Or when they're talking about how, like, the first American in space can't be a monkey or whatever, like the whole, there's some absolute comedy gold.
The first American into space is not going to be a chimpanzee.
The sequence where the 2 astronauts have the enemas, and then the one guy tells them they have to like wait in the elevator. He like takes them down the hallway. They have to go up the elevator, go up the hallway to get to the place where they can like release it and everything. Like, there's some hilarious moments in this movie.
I wonder if that's really true, because that's a long distance to travel to hold like the enema inside.
Oh
you.
yeah, and that guy was almost giving him a little. It almost seems like that guy was giving them a payback. And because I guess we should mention that whole sequence takes place in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Yeah, Love
which
West
is cool.
Medical
Like,
Center.
they were doing a lot of the testing of the pilots here, and then there was that like racist ass character on the Ed Sullivan show, the Jose Jimenez or whatever, that Alan Shepard likes quoting all the time.
My name Jose Jimenez.
What is that called? The crash helmet?
Oh, I hope not.
Hey, get that guy off.
And then when they're in the hospital, like the one like big like nurse dude looks at him and like it's all weird. So it almost seems like that sequence was payback, and it is kind of funny.
You know, Mr. Shepard, me and my friends think your Jose Jimenez imitation is A-OK. But what you're doing with it is B-A-D.
Oh, you're right. You're absolutely right. And tell me something else, Mr. Gonzalez. How am I doing?
I think you're gonna make it, man. I think you're gonna be an astronaut.
But yeah, shout out to Albuquerque. We were part of the space program in some ways, not just in this movie, but if you look into it, there were certain things that happened here in the state of New Mexico where there were certain tests and things going on like that. So
Yeah. And we still have stuff here, space programs.
Yeah,
that
totally.
Here.
Yeah, we got
Spaceport America.
the Virgin Galactic stuff going on. We had Felix Baumgartner did his space dive, like he landed here in New Mexico.
He's actually the first man to reach Mach 1 from free fall.
Really? He reached Mach 1 from free fall?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that. So that he did like what Chuck Yeager did just by through falling. Wow. I guess one other thing this movie introduces is the idea of the astronaut wives, which we'll get into in the later movies. A lot of these men were married, and like, you know, these movies show how nerve-wracking it was to be the wife of an astronaut. And we'll see this develop more in the later movies. But yeah, imagine being like, you know, having your loved one be one of these experimental pilots that could very realistically die in outer space. But yeah, well, just keep an eye out on the astronaut wives characters because they'll be very important going on in these movies.
Yeah. For me though, I just want to say that like the performance that stuck out, Scott Glenn's performance really kind of stuck out for me.
Yeah, I agree. I really like Scott Glenn as Alan Shepard.
That is a spacecraft, sir. We do not refer to it as a capsule.
Is really interesting because you kind of have these like character types. Like John Glenn is sort of the golden boy. Cooper is sort of the young hotshot. Alan Shepard's kind of the tough guy. It sort of seems like he has a chip on his shoulder sometimes. Like, but yeah, I really liked Scott Glenn as Alan Shepard, and then Ed Harris as John Glenn is really great too.
Oh yeah, definitely. He definitely embodies that really well.
Yeah.
But also like how Sam Shepard in that
So,
film,
yeah.
like he's I think only about like 20 minutes in the first part of the film, and then you see him a little bit later on.
Yeah, he
doesn't
dots the movie throughout after those initial sequences.
Yeah, you see him at the beginning, and then you see him at the end. He just, I don't know, he carries like a very like strong performance as well.
And Sam Shepard's a great actor to play Chuck Yeager. He's a famous poet, playwright, screenwriter himself. Like, but yeah, he's just an interesting character to capture that mythic quality of that guy Chuck Yeager.
Oh yeah. Do you have any favorite scenes?
One of my favorite scenes is when we see John Glenn go into orbit. Because a lot of this movie, we don't actually see outer space that much, which makes sense because it's a movie about the very early days of NASA where we're just barely sending them into orbit, seeing how many times we can send them around orbit and land them safely.
Yeah.
But John Glenn's orbit, even though he went after Alan Shepard and Gus Grissom, his orbit is one of the ones that's really highlighted as the climax of the movie when he goes into outer space. And they have the issue with his heat shield when he's coming back in. It's sort of like a scary moment when he's re-entering the atmosphere.
Oh, yeah.
And that's sort of a scene we'll see in a lot of these NASA movies. That's one of the most precarious moments when they're coming back in, making sure the heat shield works. That tremendous amount of heat that's coming in when they're re-entering the atmosphere.
Yeah, and I actually like that scene a lot. But I like it a lot mainly because how like they have the other scene that kind of goes with it with the Aboriginals.
Yeah.
As like they're like they have the bonfire. And
Yeah, they have Cooper stationed at the satellite system in Australia, so that
Yeah.
when he's on that side of the Earth, they're still in communication. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that's what I really like about that scene. And
Yeah.
then just kind of like how they have like that story, where like when they're talking with the Aboriginals and they say like, oh, it was like I'm here so I can talk to them up there. And
Yeah.
And they say like, oh, it's like you talk to them up there too.
Astronaut.
Yeah.
Well, what do you do here, astronaut?
A buddy of mine's getting ready to fly overhead, and I'm going to be talking to him on that dish, helping him out.
You bloke do that too?
Are you saying you do that yourself?
Nah, not me, mate. Not me. See that old bloke there? He know the moon, he know the star, and he know the Milky Way. He'll give you a hand. He know.
It kind of shows like how no matter where we are around the world, we're all like kind of looking to the stars.
Yeah. And that goes back to that mythic quality that The Right Stuff has that maybe none of these other movies on the list have. It has something that it connects you with sort of this ancient idea of the stars and things like that. The Right Stuff just does something about that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
All right, I guess we're good to roll into Hidden Figures now, which is interesting because Hidden Figures takes place pretty much around the exact same time as The Right Stuff does.
Oh yeah, it's still during the Mercury missions.
Yeah, it's during the Mercury missions, and it's more about the inner workings of NASA. It's about the people on the ground that were doing the calculations and doing all the sort of science and math to make these vehicles that these astronauts could fly in. Like, The Right Stuff is very much about the pilots that were willing to put their lives on the line and put themselves in the capsules. But Hidden Figures very much gets into the people that are behind all of that.
Oh yeah, and also something that a lot of these other space movies don't really touch on is like the different kind of racial relationships that were happening along at that time. 'Cause this is still the South; it's still 1960s.
Yeah. This movie takes place in Virginia at one of the NASA facilities in Virginia. And it's not just about women in a male-dominated world. It's about black women in a white man's world.
Oh yeah.
So this movie focuses on 3 black women and their story working at NASA. Katherine Johnson, played by Taraji P. Henson, Dorothy Vaughn, played by Octavia Spencer, and Mary Jackson, played by Janelle Monáe. And these 3 women worked at NASA, and it mostly focuses on Katherine Johnson. She's the main character. She did a lot of very important calculations. She was a sort of a number cruncher for NASA, and she did a lot of the most important calculations for some of those early astronaut missions. Specifically in the movie, they show for John Glenn's specific orbit. And I guess we could start by throwing to a clip here, which shows Katherine Johnson. At the time, before she was married, her name was Catherine Goebel, so you'll see that in the movie. She can't make proper calculations because things are changing every day. The weight of the capsule and all these different calculations are changing every single day, and she's having to recalculate over and over and over again to the point where she's like, I need to be in some of these meetings so I can know directly when something happens. And so we could throw to our first clip here with Hidden Figures.
Pentagon briefings are not for civilians. It requires the highest clearance.
I feel like I'm the best person to present my calculations.
You're not gonna let this go, are you?
No, I am not.
And she is a woman. There is no protocol for a woman
Okay,
attending
I
these
get
meetings.
that part, Paul. You keep quiet.
Thank you.
This is Catherine Goebel with our Trajectory and Launch Window Division. Her work is pertinent to today's proceedings. Come on. Want to get her a chair? We have a confirmed launch window for Friendship 7. Let's discuss a landing zone.
The Navy needs a singular landing zone.
20 miles square is what we can service for retrieval. Outside of that, we risk the capsule's recovery.
We'd like 3 possible recovery areas.
We can't cover half the damn ocean.
We're orbiting the Earth at what speed now?
17,544 miles per hour at the time the rocket delivers the capsule into low space orbit.
Well, that's one hell of a speeding ticket.
For argument's sake, the landing zone is the Bahamas. Should be enough to figure the go, no-go?
Yeah, in theory, sir.
We need to be past theory at this point.
We'll be able to calculate a go, no-go with that information.
When exactly is that gonna happen?
Catherine? Have a go at it?
The goal point for re-entry is 2,990 miles from where we want Colonel Glenn to land. If we assume that's the Bahamas, at 17,544 miles per hour, upon re-entry, 370 feet, at a descent angle of 46.56, sine 32 feet, and the distance would be 20,530,090 miles, or 46.33 degrees. Okay, so that puts your landing zone at 5.0667 degrees north, 77.3333 degrees west, which is here. Right here. Give or take 20 square miles.
I like her numbers.
Thank you.
I'd like to do math that quick.
Yeah, that would be cool. One of the interesting scenes in this movie is you see that Katherine Johnson has to go. Because they had segregated bathrooms at the time, there's only one bathroom for the black women across the entire sort of side of the campus or whatever that she keeps having to go to. So there's a scene in the movie where Kevin Costner gets angry and he keeps asking where she keeps disappearing to, and she has to explain to him. She's like, "Yeah, I have to spend like 30 minutes going across the entire facility just to get to the bathroom." And then Kevin Costner, there's that scene where he gets angry and he like bashes the sign, the segregated bathroom sign and stuff like that. And it's just a scene that showed like racism and segregation was like literally slowing down our progress in the space race, and that's an interesting scene.
Oh yeah,
and
definitely.
it sort of exemplifies a lot of the movie in that scene there.
Mm-hmm.
Another great scene in the movie where they have like the hangar and a bunch of the workers that are working on the missions or get to meet the astronauts, but they have the black women off to the side, and then you see like the hangar entrance is like here, and then a bunch of the astronauts are walking in, but John Glenn decides like he's going to keep walking and go talk to all these women, and it just shows like, I don't know how true that scene is. I'd like to look it up and see, but it just shows like how much of a class act John Glenn was. All these movies that depict John Glenn show him being like a super great person, and like by all accounts, like he really did live up to that reputation that he had.
Yeah, definitely. As far as like performances that stuck out, like they all did a really good job, but one that really kind of like got a hold of me was Octavia Spencer's role.
Yeah,
and her like when she's having to deal with like confronted with the racism, like being inside that library, and they're saying that like they don't have books for her there, and like she's trying to get the book for doing computing, I guess. With,
they're trying to learn the IBM system.
Yeah. But they're saying how like they don't have that in our section and such.
We don't want any trouble in here.
Oh, I'm not here for any trouble, ma'am.
What are you here for?
A book.
You have books in the colored section.
It doesn't have what I'm looking for.
Well, that's just the way it is.
So now, you know better than
Get
this.
your hands off my boys. Don't touch them.
You have a blessed day.
Yeah, it's just like, how awful is that?
Yeah, or the Janelle Monáe's character, Mary Jackson, had to petition to even be able to attend I can't remember what college she's trying to attend to learn more to be able to work at NASA, but she has to literally petition the university to be able to attend as a woman and as a black woman. But yeah, this movie definitely shows like the early days of NASA were in the 60s, and this was still before a lot of the Civil Rights Acts were passed and things like that. But yeah, this movie really gets into the inner workings of NASA, and I love movies about revised history, movies that show us something we're not seeing. That's why this movie's called Hidden Figures, because it's about the calculations that they had to make, but it's also about the people that we aren't seeing in history, and I think this movie does a great job of that.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's always a team effort. It's not just about the astronauts.
All right, I guess that's good for the first half here. When we get back on the other side, we'll talk about First Man and Apollo 13, which will take us to the next few years in the NASA program, in the early days of us getting to the moon, basically. So we'll see you on the other half. Hello and welcome back to the Movilith, the show that will just never be quite as good as John Glenn.
No, it won't.
Yeah, it's a high bar. All right, so now we can get into First Man, which sort of takes us a couple years later into the NASA program. And this movie centers around Neil Armstrong, first man on the moon, the man who led Apollo 11 mission and flew on many other missions. But yeah, this movie is very interesting. Ryan Gosling plays Neil Armstrong. And I guess what's interesting about this movie is Neil Armstrong and the way Ryan Gosling portrays him, he's a very non-traditional protagonist. He's not the sort of protagonist you see in a lot of movies. He's a very quiet person, dare I say boring sort of character. But that's sort of the point, because you sort of see going through the movie how resolute he is, how competent he is, how dedicated he is to this whole mission. And you see why he was the guy put in charge of the first mission to land on the moon.
Oh yeah. I feel like what we see in that movie is just mainly like not only resolute, but just a lot of sacrifice. Because he like kind of sacrifices his friendships and his like family.
There's a lot of tragedy throughout this movie. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You see early on in the movie that he had a daughter who died when she was still very young, and so you see how that sort of affects him. He sort of internalizes a lot of that pain.
There's tragedy, and just at some point you just kind of, it seemed like what he was trying to do was just block it all out, and then he was like, I'm just going to focus on this because then it won't let me think about all this other things that are happening here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought one thing I thought about this movie that was great is this movie has some like great point of view shots.
Oh yeah.
Like sort of seeing directly from like Neil Armstrong's perspective. You see like the instrumentation and the control panels, or like when things are going wrong in the pilot's seat or whatever. Like you really feel like the way the camera is shaking. Like you really feel like in it.
Oh
and
yeah.
This movie is very beautifully shot.
Definitely.
But yeah, I would say this is the scariest space movie because it really gets into like some of how scary it is to be in the pilot seat when things start going wrong.
Yeah, scary so far, I would say.
Yeah, I guess you could make the case that Apollo 13 is, because it gets pretty dire. Like some of the scenes where they're literally running out of oxygen, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Yeah, as far as the tragedies that this movie gets into, we could talk about 3 astronauts died during a malfunction during one of the missions, and one of them was Gus Grissom, who is a character we see in The Right Stuff, and he's a character in this movie. But yeah, there was definitely sacrifices made. Some people gave the ultimate sacrifice in pursuit of these missions, and that's an important scene in the movie, and you see how it affects the other astronauts that are going on the later Apollo missions.
One thing that kind of stuck out at me because I've been to Cape Canaveral, to check out different things like to check out the museum and see the NASA space program, and they had an area there. They had a quote that goes to like ad aspera ad astra, I think is the quote.
Yeah.
And it was like through hardship to the stars.
Yeah.
And that's what I felt like a lot of these astronauts had to go through, and you see it very reflective in this movie, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of like how crazy things can get when you're like on a mission in the pilot seat, we have a clip here which shows when they were on one of the Gemini missions, which was like one of the programs leading up to the Apollo missions.
Yeah.
Neil Armstrong and another astronaut are in orbit, and then something goes catastrophically wrong with their vehicle, where it just starts spinning like out of control. And luckily, Neil Armstrong was able to put the spacecraft back into regular orbit and get them back down to Earth.
I think I'm gonna save mine for later. Little treat. Neil, we're in a bank. We're not doing it. It's not us. It must
shut off the Aegina's control system.
Code 400. Aegina control system shut down.
Cycle the Aegina.
Turning it on. Turning it off.
Separate from the Aegina.
Setting Aegina to allow remote command. Switching on the DAC. Make sure you give it extra thrust so we don't smash into the Aegina.
On my mark. On dock. 2, 1.
Propellant 13%. It's not the Aegina, it's us.
Gemini 8 coming back into range in 3, 2, 1.
This is CSQ checking our comm link. How do you read? Gemini 8, how do you read?
We have serious problems. We're tumbling end over end up here. We're disengaged from the Aegina.
Okay, we got your spacecraft free indication here. What seems to be the problem?
We're rolling up and we can't turn anything off. We're continuously increasing the left roll.
CSQ flight. Go ahead, flight.
Did he say he cannot turn the Aegina off?
No, he says he's separated from the Aegina and he's in a roll and he can't stop it.
Flight, their roll meter reached 270 and rising. At that rate, they'll be passing out in about 40 seconds.
Paul. Close the RCS breakers. Dave!
Jiminy, did you say you were closing RCS breakers? Are you initiating RCS? Jiminy, again, did you say you were closing RCS breakers? You will not be able to control your attitude.
Okay. We're regaining control of the spacecraft. Slowly in RCS direct.
Roger.
Roger, copy.
We're pulsing the RCS slowly. It's all roll right. We're trying to kill our roll rate here.
Oh, very cool. Intense.
Yeah. That's what we do here at the Movilith when something's not working. We just turn it off and turn it back on. Yeah. So yeah, when a lot of this leads up to the actual, Apollo 11 mission where they landed on the moon, which is really beautifully shot, the way they do the whole thing there.
Mm-hmm. Those first steps.
Yeah, in the scene where they're landing, where they literally have just enough fuel to make it to the landing and stuff like that. Yeah, it gets pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's always just enough to make there.
Yeah.
You need no unnecessary weight.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, First Man, very interesting movie. One of the more modern movies about NASA, and you can definitely see it even just from that clip. Just very beautifully shot.
Definitely the most modern on our list that we have here of the full movies.
Yeah, this one was 2018, so I guess Hidden Figures was 2016. But yeah, this is definitely the most modern. Claire Foy plays Neil Armstrong's wife in this movie, and she sort of continues this the trend of the wives' characters, and you really see her embody a lot of that, like being a wreck of nerves, listening to that radio. The scene where they cut off the radio box because like some stuff is going wrong and they don't want to like make her panic, and she literally goes down to the NASA facility, be like, "Turn the box back on."
Turn the box back on.
I'll see what I can do.
Turn the box back on now.
Well, there's security protocol.
Well, I don't give a damn. I've got a dozen cameras on my front lawn, Deke. Do you want me telling them what's going on?
Yeah, Claire Foy's characters in this movie is great too.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, moving on to Apollo 13 here. Apollo 13 is a movie about a mission that went wrong. It was one of the missions to the moon. They were planning on landing on the moon, just like they did on Apollo 11, but something went catastrophically wrong midway through the journey. And once they accept that they're not going to make it to the moon, this entire movie, this entire story becomes about everybody banding together to make sure these three men make it home safely. And it's very interesting that a failed mission actually becomes one of the most fascinating of these stories because it really brings out the human element. Everybody banding together to save their lives. The emotions are running really high, and that's what this movie really does well.
Oh, definitely. We're all voyeurs with like the rest of the world and thinking like, what's going to happen next?
And this movie reminds us of like how much the whole world was watching a lot of these missions. Like Apollo 13, they have the scene where they're doing like the live broadcast, but they literally, the news networks change it because like nobody's watching and it's just sort of boring, and it just shows like after the Apollo 11 mission, people are like, oh yeah, we're landing on the moon again. Like people had already lost interest, but then the movie shows once it became a tragedy, then everybody started, like the whole world was watching this again. And like you see like the live updates, like as things are going on in the spacecraft there, the public is getting updates, and you have reporters and the NASA doing the press conferences and stuff. So yeah, it just sort of shows how like the whole world was watching when this happened.
Oh yeah, and then it's also like more, we get to see more of like the people behind NASA too.
Yeah, a lot of it's the mission control. Ed Harris plays the guy running the mission, basically the captain of the whole mission here, and he's a great character. He's got a lot of great scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
And I guess we could throw our first clip here, which shows like the a beginning of when things start going wrong. This is the scene where everything's going right initially. They're on their way to the moon, and then something happens when they stir the oxygen tanks, which causes a malfunction. And this is the beginning of like what would be the rest of the movie, trying to like bring these men home.
Oh yeah, this is my favorite. One of my favorite scenes in this show.
Yeah, this is the classic like Houston, we have a problem scene.
We got a couple of housekeeping procedures for you. We'd like you to roll right to 060 and know your rates.
Roger that. Rolling right. 060.
And then if you could give your oxygen tanks a stir.
Roger that. Hey, we've got a problem here.
What did you do?
Nothing. I stirred the tanks.
Whoa. Hey. This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem. We have a main bus B undervolt. We've got a lot of thruster activity here, Houston.
Now?
It just went offline. Oh, there's another master alarm, Houston.
I'm checking the quad.
Christ, that was no repress valve.
Maybe it's in quad C.
We've got a computer restart.
I'm gonna reconfigure the RCS.
We've got a
when
ping
these
light.
things fire, it doesn't make any sense.
We've got multiple caution and warning, Houston. We've got to reset and restart.
All right, I'm going to SDS.
Jesus. Flight, their heart rates are skyrocketing.
I keep losing radio signal. Flight, their antenna must be
22. They're gonna have to do it manually if they do.
One at a time, people. One at a time. One at a time. Ecom, is this an instrumentation problem, or are we looking at real power loss here?
It's reading a quadruple failure. That can't happen. It's got to be instrumentation.
You are breaking up, 13.
Hey, get this hatch to seal.
Just stow it. We've been hit by a meteor. We'd be dead by now. We're gonna try to get us out of this lurch.
Houston, you're in the mud. Did you say switch to Omni Bravo? Roger, and the signal strength on the high
fighting me. What's the story here, Jack? We keep flirting with gimbal lock.
Honesty, we need a confirmation. What system do you have down?
Okay, Houston. Fuel cell 1, fuel cell 3. We got a main bus B undervolt, cryo pressure, suit compressor. What don't we have? AC bus 1, AC bus 2, command module computer, and O2 flow high. I don't know. Maybe this is a caution and warning failure.
Houston, we are venting something out into space.
I can see it outside of window 1 right now. It's definitely a gas of some sort.
It's got to be the oxygen.
Roger, Odyssey, we copy your venting.
Give me an alarm.
Okay, let's everybody think of the
4 levels.
Yeah, Roger.
Yeah, you can really see how quiet everybody gets at the end of that scene, because that's one of those moments of everybody being like, "Oh wow, like we might die in this capsule."
It's like, what is salvageable at this point?
Yeah, and so immediately from that moment, I guess they haven't gotten to the moment where they realize they've lost the moon. There's like a couple more scenes where they're like, "All right, let's try and fix what the problem is," and the one guy mentions a thing about saving some of the oxygen tanks, and Ed Harris is like, "Yeah, we can't do that, otherwise we're not going to make it to the moon." And the other guy's like, "I don't think we're going to make it to the moon, really." So when they accept that they're not going to make it to the moon, and then it just becomes about like, let's get them home. Like that's when, from that moment on, that it's just about like, what works, what doesn't, what can we do to solve the issues and get them back.
Oh yeah, that's a big part of the movie that really kind of draws me in.
Yeah.
Because in that scene that you're kind of talking about, it's like they're all just kind of brainstorming. All the scientists are gathered together, and they're like, "All right, so how do we get from here around the moon back to Earth to here?" So currently, they only make it like 3/4 of the way. How do we get that other fourth?
Yeah, it's just a bunch of very, very intelligent people discussing like what they need to do to solve this problem. And I guess that could kind of lead into our next clip, because there's a series of problems that they have to overcome. One of the first problems is they're losing oxygen, and the capsule's filling with the carbon dioxide that they're exhaling, and they're going to suffocate to death unless they fix the issue, the filter issue that filters out the carbon dioxide and keeps the oxygen levels high. So this is a great example about everybody from the astronauts in the capsule to the guys down at mission control all come together and try and solve a problem.
Gene, we have a situation brewing with the carbon dioxide.
We had a CO2 filter problem on the lunar module.
5 filters on the limb.
Which were meant for 2 guys for a day and a half. So I told the doc.
You're already up to 8 on the gauges. Anything over 15 and you get impaired judgment, blackouts, the beginnings of brain asphyxia.
What about the scrubbers on the command module?
They take square cartridges.
The ones on the limb are round.
Tell me this isn't a government operation.
This just isn't a contingency we've remotely looked at.
Well, I suggest you gentlemen invent a way to put a square peg in a round hole. Rapidly.
Okay, people, listen up. People upstairs handed us this one, and we gotta come through. We gotta find a way to make this fit into the hole for this, using nothing but that. Let's get it organized.
Okay, let's build a filter.
Better get some coffee going, too, someone.
The deadly CO2 gas is literally poisoning the astronauts with every breath in and out.
Heads up, heads up.
And spokespeople will not comment further.
Go. Heads up, people. Look out now.
What's this?
That's what they gotta make.
Well, I hope you got the procedures for me.
Right here.
That's duct tape. You need an LCG bag, 2 LCG bags, the red suit hoses, and you've got the flight plan covered. You want to cut the duct tape 3 feet long.
Tell me his arm.
Just use your arm.
It's a good arm length.
Oh, okay, Houston, I see what you're getting at. Hold on. Okay, Jack, tear that piece of tape down the middle lengthwise.
All right.
Hold on, Houston.
While the astronauts appear to have enough oxygen to keep them alive, one thing they have too much of is carbon dioxide.
Shit, I tore it.
Shit.
Houston, what do we do if we rip the bag? Can we tape it?
They just tore the bag.
No.
Stand by.
What should I tell them to do?
Well, they should have one more bag left.
But they've still got a long way to come, and they are now working on their backup facilities, their emergency facilities, and the problem is, if anything more goes wrong, they're in real trouble.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah, there's just a series of problems they're having to overcome each time. Like later there's the trajectory issue where they have to use the Earth as like in the window as the target to try and realign themselves so they're on the proper angle to be able to enter without dying with the heat shield failure. Jim Lovell's wife in this movie is very interesting. She's sort of the culmination of a lot of the wife characters we've seen throughout these movies, where she's sort of having to live the worst scenario that a lot of these women fear about their husbands going out into space, where like the very real possibility that her husband is going to die out there in space on this mission. And you see her dealing with that, her and her children.
I realize how hard this is, Marilyn, but the whole world is caught up in it. It's the biggest story
Henry. Those people don't put one piece of equipment on my lawn. If they have a problem with that, they can take it up with my husband. He'll be home on Friday.
You know, with this movie, 2 kind of quotes kind of stuck out to me. There's like kind of like the main one that people always kind of quote that like, Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah.
I wasn't really thinking about that one. I was thinking about like quotes that kind of resonated with me. And one of them that came to me was, we've never lost an American in space. We're sure as hell not going to lose one on my watch.
Yeah.
Failure is not an option. It's like the resolve.
We never lost an American in space. We're sure as hell not going to lose one on my watch. Failure is not an option.
You mentioning that one makes me think of the other line when they're about to come in through the heat shield, and one of the main directors is kind of nervous, and Ed Harris is like, he's like, I think this is going to be NASA's finest hour.
This could be the worst disaster NASA's ever experienced.
With all due respect, sir, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
But this movie is very triumphant in the end. You know, the whole scene with the heat shield, and everybody's like, is it going to work? Is it going to make it? And they come through, and you see the splashdown with the parachutes, and it's just like one of those triumphant moments in film. And you can literally, this movie, you see like the whole world like rejoice, like when they land, like you see everybody celebrating, and it's just a great moment of triumph towards the end of this movie.
If I were to sum up this whole movie in one quote, this is the quote that I actually kind of think of when I think of Apollo 13.
Yeah.
And that is, I don't care about what anything was designed to do. I care about what it can do.
I don't care what anything was designed to do. I care about what it can do.
And one more thing we should mention about this movie is the way that they shot this movie is very interesting. They actually shot a lot of this movie in simulated zero gravity, which, for those of you who don't know, like you can simulate zero gravity by taking an airplane, flying it to a certain altitude, and just letting it free fall, and then flying it up again, letting it free fall. So they actually worked with NASA in the making of this movie, and they took one of NASA's actual airplanes where they do this with astronauts, simulating the zero gravity. And they did this hundreds of times. You know, very few movies that I know have ever gone that far to actually simulate zero gravity. But this movie did it. Ron Howard decided that they wanted to, you know, really make it look realistic, and I think it really pays off in this movie. Like they really are floating, and you can really see that in a lot of scenes. Like, and for that reason, that's why I think this is one of the best space movies. I don't know if Ron Howard gets enough respect for going that far. Like very few that's some Christopher Nolan level stuff.
Yeah.
Very few people have gone that far in the pursuit of realism for a movie.
Oh yeah, it's funny. You thought Christopher Nolan. My immediate thought was James Cameron.
James Cameron. Oh yeah, I could see that.
One thing that I noticed is that there is one character in all 4 movies, and that character is Deke Slayton. He was one of the original Mercury astronauts. He was played in The Right Stuff by Scott Pollan.
Yeah.
And then when we go to Hidden Figures, he's very small. You just see him in the background, really.
Okay.
When they introduce the Mercury astronauts, but
Yeah.
you see him in the background. That's played by Evan Holtzman. And then in First Man, it's played by Kyle Chandler.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, and then in Apollo 13, then it's
He's like the
Chris
boss.
Ellis is the actor.
Deke is one of the original Mercury 7 astronauts, ladies and gentlemen, and now he's our boss. He hands out the astronauts' flight assignments.
That's what's interesting about like looking at these movies in a group as a genre is like you can sort of see how they all relate to each other, and a lot of the crossover with characters and things like that, and actors even. Yeah, it's interesting that we're talking about these movies because we're definitely very much in another space race right now.
Yeah, now it seems like it's like a race with the Chinese.
Yeah.
They're trying to land some people on the moon now.
Yeah, China announced their intentions to put people on the moon and on Mars in the not too distant future, and so you know, the United States has definitely in the last few years stepped up its presence in outer space for sure.
And now that we'll venture off from like the historical science, now we'll be breaking ground and going into the science fiction a little bit.
Yeah, and that's like a great introduction to our next episode will be the plausible space movies. So we'll talk about The Martian, we'll talk about a movie called Space Cowboys with Tommy Lee Jones and Clint Eastwood, which is great, Gravity, and another mystery movie which we can't reveal yet, but we'll get into that in the next episode.
Yeah, definitely.
But I guess that's it for today. Thanks for joining us on this journey through near space. And like we said, we'll pick it up. This is sort of a 2-part topic, and we'll get into the plausible space movies next time. So thanks for joining us again on the Movilith. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you.